All right, kick the door in. The bar's open for business. Come on in, sit down, take a seat, relax, get a drink. I actually forgot my drink because my kids were being crazy. But I did remember to wear my hat that's got my name on it in case I forget my name. So I don't even need to introduce myself. There I am, if anyone wants to know. I have 4 kids, two dogs. One's particularly annoying. He actually ate my daughter's eggs this morning, and I wanted to like in my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to kick him, but I know like this is God sanctifying me, so I didn't. So
don't be a dog kicker. It's like every Stephen King novel. You know who the bad guy is because he kicks the dog.
You know who's gonna die by the guy who kicks the dog.
Right. So I that went through my mind, and I didn't kick the dog. I'm trying to think, like in Beauty and the Beast, didn't like Gustav kick a dog?
I don't remember.
Well, the Beast is like a dog, so
I only read the classic fairy tale. I don't watch the Disney movie.
Oh wow, okay. Moving on,
which is extremely dark, I think, right?
Yeah,
Beauty and the Beast isn't that dark. Cinderella is pretty dark.
I thought Beauty and the Beast was pretty dark as well.
It's not that dark. Know. I mean, the imprisonment, you know. And...
yeah, I mean, it doesn't like kidnap her, and it's much worse than the Disney version.
He yells at her a lot more, probably.
Not in the original versions that I've read.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm a pastor with Brian at Trinity Reformed Church in Las Vegas. Moving on.
Well, I am a pastor as well, a former member of the institutional church, Roman Catholicism. Having come out of it because I learned actual, biblical theology, and through apostolic succession by, through their teaching, I am now a pastor of Trinity Reformed Church in Las Vegas, a non-denominational yet historically rooted church. Imagine that.
Sounds like a true Catholic church to me.
Yeah, sounds like something Athanasius would be a part of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that all you want people to know about you?
For right now, yeah.
Okay. I'm April Cato. I am a wife and mother and not a pastor because I have no apostolic succession. Doesn't exist for the ladies.
And you have no dogs to kick.
Well, I don't know.
No, I have no dogs to kick anymore. But both of my dogs have gone to their graves.
They've kicked the bucket.
Not to heaven. I don't think all dogs do.
That was awful. The timing was perfect. Like I feel like I don't want to laugh at that, April. I'm sorry.
But... Well, it's okay. You know what? I've moved on. They've moved on. We've all moved on. It's okay.
Right. Okay, so what are we talking about tonight? I'm looking up. I still haven't looked at book 4 of the Institutes, Brian, that you sent me. So,
man, it's so good.
To play here, probably.
That other video that I sent you guys, listen to that when you get time because he brings up a bunch of quotes.
It sounded really good.
Yeah, it's actually toward like the middle to 3/4 of it or whatever that he starts quoting Calvin and Athanasius and all those guys, and it's like, man, they pretty much say what we have been saying. So.
Oh, good. Well, we know Cyprian said what we've said, so
yeah.
What has he said? You might be asking. What are you guys talking? Can we be part of this podcast? Well, yes, you can. Tonight we are going.
They read the title. They know what it's about. They saw the thumbnail.
So this is in the future. We'll already have the thumbnail. I'm assuming April's going to make it really on point on the nose. So maybe
you'll know what it's about.
You'll have Trent Horn's big nose on there. Sorry, Trent.
Oh, great.
And. I mean, he's Roman, right? Romans have big noses. I have a big nose because I'm Roman. Anyway, we're going to do a video, a critique of Redeemed Zoomers talk with Mr. Trent Horn.
Yeah, video response.
That's what we're doing today. Yeah, we're gonna give a little response. Gavin's given a response. he's given his Anabaptist response. Nobody cares about Anabaptists, right? Right. So Gavin,
He would
nice
not be
try.
happy with you saying that.
Not nice try. If Gavin has listened to any of our stuff, he would know that we're fans of him, and I mean that and totally in jest. And I wouldn't even call you Gavin in person. I call you Dr. Ortland because I respect you.
Because we love you.
There's a fly in here. I'm just trying to be facetious for our audience. Anyway, so that's what we're doing. So Brian is going to the Gen Xer in here is going to be in charge of the tech. So we'll see how this goes. April and I are both millennials, so we should be doing this.
I mean, our producer is also a Zoomer, so he can help us.
Is Alexander a Gen or
Z?
He's Gen Z, right?
Yeah, he's Gen Z.
He actually has some good things to say too.
The last great generation was Gen X, but
Well, thanks.
Gen X is like, what is that? It's like the weird middle group.
It's the institutional generation. It's the
Mm.
if you're not a part of Gen X, then really you're just an Anabaptist. So
oh man,
yeah,
man.
that's my
church.
That's my logical argument.
Yeah.
Mimicking Redeemed Zoomer's argument, I would add. All right. Well, it's interesting. Gavin actually comes up here. We're not going to look at that part, but
yes, Trent brings up Gavin, doesn't he?
Yeah. What I want to just
any of this, so I didn't know any of this. I basically only know the telephone version of this. Like I've heard about it, but I haven't listened to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's fascinating to me is so among all the Roman apologists, I like Trent Horn because he actually understands Protestant theology and what the issues are. And I feel like this conversation is him probably slightly frustrated with Redeemed Zoomer just because he doesn't seem to understand what the issues are between the Reformed and Roman Catholicism. That it really has to do with, I think, sola scriptura and what your ultimate authority is. And Redeemed Zoomer seems to be very like
he tries
almost
to
like not. Yeah, he doesn't even seem to realize that's what distinguishes the two, as though like he's looking at kind of these what I would argue is much smaller distinctions. But really what makes someone Protestant is not whether they're part of an institution, but whether they are examining with the scripture or whatever. So basically a lot of these clips are almost like just trying to show that he's got an institutional view, and Trent's trying to say, yeah, but what's making you Protestant then? If you think that it's the church that has authority, he's trying to like, what's your view of a scripture? And anyway, we'll see as we go along, but it ends up being very convoluted. And I think part of it is, I don't want to blame everything on people's youth, because he is well read. For I let my kids watch him. I'm not a big Minecraft fan, but I'll watch every once in a while if I think he's saying. And in general, I might agree with him on a lot of theology, but this particular thing is just, to me, a weird thing that doesn't fit. Like this fits his view fits Roman Catholicism. It doesn't fit Reformed theology, and he acts like it is. And we'll discuss that as we hear it. But anyway, let's start the whole thing.
Well, while you're bringing it up, it is interesting that at the beginning, this recon, because what's kind of stemmed all this conversation is Redeemed Zoomer's Reconquista expedition or whatever he's doing in the PCUSA. And it really is like, at first it was kind of like oh yeah, that's a cute little thought there, Redeemed Zoomer. And then it became
it's
really
a nice ministry to have if that's your ministry or something. And,
right. But then all of a sudden it explodes. He explodes. And he's getting a lot of airtime. And now it's like, well, what's the theology behind this Reconquista? Because he's blown up in popularity, now people are dissecting this movement to see if it's actually biblical or not.
Yeah. Well, and then the reasonings are just kind of like, oh wait,
well, now it's like we've been here before. We've been here before.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, you're a Gen Z, you know a lot. But welcome to the real world where everything's been tried before.
Yeah.
Well, and I think Gavin addresses this in his critique of this video. I've only seen clips of their conversation from Gavin's video, and he talks about, how there are legitimate times that you should leave a church, and it seems like maybe Redeem Zoomer is just pushing against that and saying, no, you need to just white knuckle it until it reforms. And I don't know that that's a faithful position to take.
Yeah.
If his argument is true, if the church is institutional, then he's absolutely right. Then you do die for it. Like you
Right.
don't leave.
Yeah.
Like that is the stand you take to your death, because that is essentially leaving Jesus Christ. And that's what is being argued. Like, are we leaving Jesus Christ or not leaving Jesus Christ? Because if Christ is the head of the church, and I leave that, then I leave Christ.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're saying.
Yeah, leaving a liberal PC USA church is not you abandoning Christ.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's like there's so many questions of, should you even refer to it as a church? Is it a church? Is it a false church? Is it, when you have power, you excommunicate. Do you just let people sit there when you have power and they're just going to, teach the wrong things? Well, no. When you don't have power, what do? Well, come out from among them. So it seems like that's where he's missing it.
Yeah, and this is even true consistently, like in marriage. If there's a husband that is not feeding or taking care of his wife, or her life is in danger, she has to leave just for the sake of her life.
Yeah,
she's not the one divorcing, right? She's the one that's actually saying, I'm married to you still, but you're the one divorcing me. Like you left me by not taking care of me. Like there's a consistent thread here.
I'm glad you bring that up, because a lot of evangelical creators have been calling me out recently that a messenger of truth guy said, oh, Redeem Zoomer's not Protestant because he seems to see himself as closer to Catholics than evangelicals, which I do. I do find a lot more agreement with Catholics than evangelicals. But so did Martin Luther and John Calvin. They were much harsher against the Anabaptists than they were against the Catholics.
Right.
And the evangelicals today are basically the same as the Anabaptists, not identical. But evangelicals don't really have any continuity to any group. So the same things that the reformers condemned the Anabaptists for are the same things that evangelicals believe, namely anti-institutionalism and no views of sacramental efficacy,
right,
and no respect for church history.
Here's the interesting. He says Luther and Calvin were against the Anabaptists more than they were against like the Roman Catholics. Which is, I guess, generally true, but it's like saying, who's Christ more against, Sodom, Gomorrah, or Bethsaida?
Well, it's like it's sort of like so Luther thinks the Pope is the Antichrist.
Yeah,
Calvin does as well. Luther calls the Roman Church Babel. It's Babylon, which is the pagan, wicked entity that is against God's people, destroying God's people, all that sort of thing. So there's so much error just in the statements that he made. Like, it's hard to even know what to pick out. The Anabaptists weren't just anti-institutional in terms of, they were against, like, seeing a succession of people in buildings. Like, they were like anti-society. They were anti everything the church had built, everything Christianity had gone into in culture. They were anti-government. A lot of them denied the Trinity. They had weird ideas of Jesus. They were like, you get Munster where, like, they're like, hey, everybody, marriage is not a thing anymore, so I'm going to take your wife. Great. It's like all institutions, like, that's very different than evangelicals who are just like, we think that succession comes through teaching, the apostolic teaching, and therefore it's not really about the buildings, which is exactly what Athanasius said that he tries to allude to quite often throughout this thing. It's not about the building. Athanasius, during the heresy, the Arian heresy, who literally is a patriarch of Alexandria and has authority, realizes that a lot of the church is being taken over by Arians. And he's still trying to tell his people, hey, look, the church isn't the buildings. So if they get the buildings, then who cares? then we'll go out to the desert. He literally makes a statement. I don't know if I captured it or not later, but he'll make the statement that Athanasius didn't like go out to the desert and start a church. And Athanasius literally makes a statement to go out to the desert and worship. So I just thought it was so ironic. It's like, has he read Athanasius? What do you mean? And he's like, well, he didn't start the first Bible church, of the desert. And it's like, well, yeah, because no one named their churches something different, but they're all local churches that are independent because they're based on what that particular pastor's teaching, whether he's an Arian, whether he's Orthodox, whatever. So you don't need to go start something new because you don't have this like one entity that's become corrupt and then you're just like a church within it trying to do something else. You've got a mixture of ideas that you're trying to fight for. That's very different than you entering the PCUSA that now has got, by his own admission, largely corrupted, largely liberal, largely apostate, and he doesn't have power. It's like at that point, then you go out from it. But the idea that all the evangelicals are Anabaptists is not true. Like, that's not what Anabaptists are. It's not just that they're anti-institutional when it comes to the church, which I would argue is evangelicals aren't either. So now we have to understand, like, what does he mean by institutional? Like, what he seems to mean is those who had the label of Christianity and are in charge of particular traditional buildings and offices of a particular group that was previously labeled Christian. And for him, then, that somehow has some sort of Christian continuity with the apostles, even when it rejects the apostolic teaching. But that seems to be what he's trying to argue. And I just think that is wholly not Protestant. That is absolutely a Roman Catholic understanding of apostolic succession.
Well, yeah, if the church is like these like empty shell of like property and like governmental sanction, like if the government approves you and it gives you this property and then you have it for a long time, like if that's the church and that can't be taken over by heretics, it doesn't matter who's in the building, those things are the church, right? And you fight for those things. Then one, the church is like a worldly entity because it's attached to the world that is the devil's world, which is very problematic theologically. And then two, it's like how did the church operate? Obviously, like before all of these things, before Constantine came to power, and these things are become a reality for the church.
Before the Pope was given a palace.
Yeah, right. When Rome wasn't even showing up to any councils, right? Not even a representative of Rome. What then? So like it doesn't make sense that these things are true without like those things being foundationally true. It wasn't always true. It became that way. And then somehow we just adopted, well, that's the culmination of the church growing in the world. And then we start at some point in history and say, here's the institution. And then that's the thing we have to keep. No longer the spiritual understanding of the church being, like you said, teaching, doctrine, loving one another. Those are the core things that continue on.
I think, and that's really what it comes down to, is it's like you look at this even with, I don't know, the idea of nationhood and how are you fighting for ideas? Are you fighting for land? Like most wars have been fought over, land and resources. And it's this kind of physical understanding of dominion has come into the church as well. So instead of seeing it as spiritually, how are we united as one body in Christ? And how do we live out that unity in our lives and love for one another and service to one another? Everything then becomes about, I need to stake my claim on a particular piece of land, on a particular resource. And that's the battle that we're going to wage. And that's somehow how we're going to win. It's like taking secular military strategy and then applying it to the church.
Well, yeah, if you're a good king, what do? You go out and conquer. You build buildings. That's what kings do. And yet we have a Christ who said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom was of this world, my followers would be fighting. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm." And so we don't struggle against flesh and blood. We're not looking to build buildings. Like literally, the early church is meeting in people's houses, and then later in catacombs, these filthy catacombs with skulls and bones and stuff everywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, but later it got a palace and it got a bunch of buildings and it got some prestige in the world. And it's like, who cares? So what? Was that founded by the apostles? I mean, it's just like that you're talking about something that even you as a Protestant, frankly, have rejected. That the institution actually wasn't through. Otherwise, you'd be Roman Catholic. So obviously you went out, you agree with people who started something new, quote unquote. I would argue it's not new, because the new thing might be buildings, but that's not a new church. The church remains, in terms of apostolic teaching, in continuity with the apostles, if it's what they taught. So the idea that somehow the institution is where the Spirit of God is it just muddied thinking? Because if you were to ask him, do you think that God's with the buildings? I don't know if he would say. He probably would say, well, no, of course not. And you'd ask him, well, is the church invisible? He would say yes, but then he'd say, well, it's not just invisible. And I'd be like, okay, let's go back for a minute. Yeah, it's not just invisible. However, is it essentially invisible? In other words, the union that the people have, is it essentially, we literally are bonded by what? The Spirit, who is invisible. So essentially, it's invisible in the sense that our bond and unity and what makes us the church is invisible. Now, we physically manifest ourselves because we're physical beings in physical places. But what makes us the church is something that is not physical. And that's why we can be the church in the desert, or we can be the church in a really pretty building, because the building and the desert have nothing to do with it. Those are just places where we're meeting.
Yeah, this is where like I had real issues with this overemphasis on gospel communication in architecture. They place this emphasis like, oh, the baptismal is in the front, so when you walk in, you understand that baptism is the way. It's like, what? Hold on a second. All right, you're obsessing over like what the temple used to look like and all these images of Eden and the pomegranates. Like you want to go back there and show these beautiful pictures of heaven, so when you walk in, you can forget the world out there and you're looking forward to the eschaton, right? Like, I'm sorry, but the physical gospel is the body of Jesus Christ, right? And like literally, like Christ at the right hand of the Father, like that is the temple. And then by the Spirit living in us, then now we are the physical temple. If I want to show somebody the baptismal font, like the picture of the baptismal font and what the allegiance that you're giving to Jesus Christ, the physical representation of the kingdom on earth, I care less about whatever masonry is in front of me, but is going to be the love and the actions I show the other believer. The physical manifestation of the temple is that, because the physical temple is Christ, his body. And then Paul says that we're his body by extension with the Spirit living in us. So if a pagan walks into this beautiful church, and they do it all the time, because I can go to New York, Manhattan, and go down Times Square and everybody's up high walking by these beautiful cathedrals, that's not doing anything for them. They're not being saved by that. What they're going to be saved by is, as Paul says, when a believer walks in your assembly and sees you orderly worshiping God, being exhorted in their own, like, right, everyone understands what the teaching is saying, they're going to say, truly is God is with you. And they're going to, right, maybe be saved right there, or at least walk out saying, this isn't a group of crazies.
Well, and I wonder if he would.
Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I wonder if he would push back and say, okay, it's not really the build, although he does emphasize a lot about the buildings. I got to tell you.
He does. Even the Reconquista movement has a map search function that you can find historic buildings of churches in your area.
But even if he says, "Oh, I'm not really saying it's just the buildings," it's like, okay, well, what are you saying is in continuity then? All you're saying is then a label, a name on a group. But if that group is no longer identifies, it's no longer the same thing it was before, then all you're really saying is a name of a group is what is the institution. Because ultimately what actually continues on from genuine, let's say, Scottish Presbyterianism or whatever in America? Well, I would argue that once the PCUSA becomes apostate, the OPC, even though it has a different name, continues the apostolic teaching, insofar as it has apostolic teaching within it, and the PCA and anything else that, like, and the other conservative things that he views as like cowards who fled or whatever. Did they really flee, or are they just the same group and they just changed their name? Like, are we really just talking about a label? That's what it seems like.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, like, going back to the architecture thing just for one moment, it seems like I don't think he recognizes that he would hold our position that you shouldn't have any images of God, any images of Jesus, right? He's very firm in that. But then when you have these ideas of displaying spiritual truths in physical form and that somehow is communicating to you, it's not that different from what the Roman Catholic Church does in their kind of places of pilgrimage or in their iconography or in their relics. Like, anyone who's been to the Middle East knows that you go to Bethlehem, you go to the Church of Nativity, and they have this spot where Jesus was born, and this is a place that, people go and they kiss this spot, and it becomes this like euphoric spiritual pilgrimage that people want to take because it's connected to this place. They feel like they're going to be more holy, they're going to be more spiritual, connected to this place. I don't think the jump from icon veneration to that is that far.
Right.
I think that's part of the problem. Going to the naming thing, we have to understand that language changes all the time. I think I've used this example before, but if you're reading a Jane Austen novel and it talks about, someone being a gay fine fellow, it's not talking about him being a homosexual. Now we understand that term differently than they did then. So calling someone a evangelical, in the early 1900s is different than calling someone an evangelical today. Those terms mean different things. Just like the term, Presbyterian has potentially different meanings at different points in time. The name isn't infallible, and it's not immutable.
Well, I mean, I would argue that American Presbyterianism was in discontinuity with Scottish Presbyterianism. In fact, a lot of the Presbyterian churches, when they came over, didn't have a presbytery. There were just a bunch of local churches that had like the theology of, the Scottish Presbyterian Church in some of them. So, like, I mean, at some point, he's guilty of the same things. Is that Anabaptist? Because they didn't have, again, the hierarchical structure, or they weren't in continuity with what came before in terms of the physical structure. I wouldn't argue such things. I just think it's nonsense.
Has pervaded its way, has made its way into like most of conservative American Protestants.
When you call them Protestant schismatic groups, I want to make sure we get all of our terms clear here, because a lot of people, when they think of schism, they think about departing from someone who has legitimate ecclesial magisterial authority.
Yeah.
Are you talking about people who, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, claim to be like a mainline Protestant denomination, but they're not? They only are in name only?
Sort of. I think voluntary schism is a lot different than forced schism. There's been many schisms in church history, like the Chalcedonians versus the non-Chalcedonians,
right,
and the Great Schism and the Protestant Reformation. In none of those cases was there one group consciously and willingly and voluntarily departing from.
That's false.
Yeah.
First, I claim it's false.
There's actually two things I want to hold on and go to this, but yeah, that's that's, in fact, he hates like Jay Gresham. I wouldn't say he hates, but he has a major problem with Jay Gresham Machen. And I'm like, Machen was kicked out. What do you mean? Like he didn't leave. Like he was literally forced out. Like I don't know what the problem is.
Or institutional based,
Mhm.
just to understand who is a Protestant. It seems like your definition is more of a historical institutional continuity versus doctrine or methods.
I mean, basically, yeah.
Okay.
Like if I am some random guy in my basement and I decide that I agree with transubstantiation and purgatory, does that make me a Catholic? No, I have to actually join the Catholic Church.
Okay.
See, here's this is he shows his ace card right here.
Yeah.
Doctrine doesn't define.
Right. It's
What?
like, hold on a second.
Well, this is why Trent brought it up, because Trent knows Protestant theology, its apostolic succession is in doctrine, which is why he's like, oh, so you sound more institutional, which means you're
Right.
not Protestant.
Yeah.
That's not, you're
Oh,
not Protestant
no.
if you think the authority is in the institution rather than in the doctrine. Because as soon as you say that, the question's gonna come. Now, Trent was nice to him, but in reality, the question should have come, why are you not Roman Catholic?
Mhm.
Because you that's the institution, or why are you not Eastern Orthodox or whatever, the people who claim, at least.
Why did you flee
go
from
back.
those traditions, you coward?
Right. Yeah. Why'd you flee? Why are you with all the cowards who fled the Roman Catholic Church?
You should
And you
go
might
in
say,
there
oh, well,
and reform it.
well, see, he would want to then say, oh, well, they were excommunicated. It's like, yeah, but you weren't personally. Go back. And this goes also, like, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it goes to also the fact that I think he's doing exactly what all evangelicals do. He's not doing anything different whatsoever. He's just as individualistic as he's trying to claim that they all are in his judgments. And he's going to have to fall back on the authority of Scripture to judge everything, and it's not going to be the authorities in the institution. So this is not even true in his own beliefs, at least in practice. He just has this theoretical belief that there's some sort of institutional authority with the church and whatnot.
How do you as a layman, I mean, he has this high view of institutions, but then at the same time he's saying you need to reform that institution. So then what, you're undermining the teaching of the institution that you're under?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like an institutional view. That seems like you're a lone ranger. You've strolled into, the town at dusk and you're going to start taking out all the bad guys.
Yeah, it's literally, I'm a part of this club, but I'm not being led by it in any way. Like he's not being led by the PCUSA in terms of their theology and ethics. So in what way is he a part of it? Just because again, it's a label. It comes down to the fact that he's just labeling himself. This is sort of like saying, I'm a Girl Scout because I have a membership in the Girl Scouts. Now I'm not a girl.
You like to eat cookies.
Yeah, I love cookies. I'm not a girl. I don't actually have any sort of allegiance to the Girl Scouts in terms of what they believe or do. I don't really, nothing or whatever, but I'm a Girl Scout. And it's like, well, no, you're not. You're not a part of the group just because you label yourself. Even if I go to a Girl Scout meeting, they're going to be like, what are you doing here, dude? Like,
well, maybe not in 2025.
It doesn't make me a Girl Scout to hang out with at Girl Scout meetings. So, like, what makes you a Presbyterian USA member other than you're labeled that? Maybe your name's down in some list somewhere or something as being a member, but in reality, you're not. It's not a church that's over you that you look at having any authority over you in terms of teaching you and leading you in what's right. Because as you've said yourself, the majority of the Presbyterian USA in the USA would lead you into apostasy. And you think it's apostasy and you reject that. On what basis? Well, on the word of God, because you're sola scriptura.
I'm thinking all roads lead to Korah and Korah's rebellion.
Yeah.
Imagine you're in Korah's group and you hear what he says, and you, in your mind, you're like, dude, you're going against Moses. He's the one that's actually been called by God. What are you doing? Like, this isn't right. But you know what? I'm going to stick with you because I'm going to fix this little group, and we're going to bring the truth back into here. And God's like, no. If you stay with Korah, if you're with him, if you're touching his stuff, you're going down with the ship, right? The label meant nothing. The label Israelite, the label Levite, the label priest didn't mean anything because they disassociated themselves with the doctrine and said, we're holy enough. We don't need to go with you anymore. We're doing our own thing, probably going back to Egypt. There seems to be a lot more instances in scripture where the doctrine is what you stick with, right? Which is the doctrine of being the image you worship God through. So really, like to April's point of all these, like, you're tipping your toe in the Tiber if you're going to use all these, if you're going to use architecture as communicating spiritual truths, you might as well jump all the way in. If you're going to say, well, it's the label that matters, not the doctrine. I'm going to worship God through the label, and the doctrine doesn't matter. But that's what God says, I'll kill you for if you leave, because there's no other way to worship me than by the word, which is the doctrine.
I could have swore that when there's corruption in the temple and God actually leaves the temple and abandons it, it's kind of weird. It's got a coward for leaving the temple. He's gonna call all people cowards for fleeing, and use the word fleeing as though they're running away in terror from the liberals, rather than, is God a coward? No, I think he's like, no, that's corrupt, and I will have nothing to do with corruption, and I'll make a courageous statement as I go away and show that I'm going to abandon this
Lot is
institutional
told to
building.
leave. Lot's told to leave Sodom and Gomorrah. Should he have just stayed and, fought to reform it? I mean,
well, if I'm surrounded by a bunch of enemies, do I just like stay there and be like, no, I'm courageous and I'm going to fight? That makes you a fool. If you actually you actually kind of get your position, so you may have to flee in order to fortify your position in order to fight.
Yeah.
That makes more sense when you're surrounded by people. I mean, it's just ridiculous to me.
I also don't want to like harp so much on being young, but I do think this is like the young man's thing.
Yeah.
The young man's thing is like, I'm going to die on every hill and I'm going to get my glory by dying on every hill. And it's like, sometimes there's wisdom in being like, this is not a battle I'm going to win. I need to leave and go fight this battle somewhere else. This is not the place to fight this battle.
This is a problem though. So he like so many, I would say this is what he has in continuity with like the CREC, because I watched their critique of him and they would agree, I think, largely with us, but partly the problem is they hold some of this sort of triumphal,
physical kingdom building stuff.
Yeah. So because of
they
that,
elevate denominationalism above, I think, any other denomination.
Yeah.
Right.
Honestly.
And because of that, it's sort of like I'm listening to the critique and I'm like, you guys really you're critiquing yourselves. You don't realize it. But it's that sort of like, oh, well, everyone else is retreated. Evangelicalism retreated. And again, this is one of those historical myths that gets just repeated over and over again. I don't know where it comes from. Evangelicals didn't retreat. Evangelicals are the ones who actually are like, oh, we're going to go back into the institutions. We're going to go back into these things. Fundamentalism retreated, but it only retreated again to fortify its position in order to attack liberalism. Like Machen is constructing Westminster to destroy the theology of Princeton. Like it's not done to where like, oh no, I guess we'll just go in this corner secretly and hide or something. It's like, no, it's literally, you've got your fort, you kicked us out, here, we're going to build our fort and I'm going to start shooting at you. Like it's literally for war. It's not because anyone's retreating. And so that's not what happened. That's a lie that I think the modern generation tells us, so they can be like, we're not going to be like them. We're going to actually, try to take over the culture. And it's like, have you ever heard of the moral majority? People have been trying to take over the culture as Christians since we've been in America. The Puritans were doing it. The moral majority was doing it. The social gospel and the social movements of the 19th century were doing it. Everyone's been trying to do it. It's literally never happened that people have been retreating. That's a lie.
They've just all been trying to do it in the wrong ways.
Huh?
So they've been trying to do it in the wrong ways.
Yeah. So see, this is where I'm torn a little bit, right? Because what we've been describing a little bit is like the Benedict option, right? So a lot of one side is going to say this is the Christian strategy, right? The Christian strategy is retreat to build your fort to fire back. Right? This is the let's move to the wilderness and start a Christian community, right? To build up this army to go take over. Yeah. Which I also am like, that's stupid. So like,
well, yeah.
Right?
That's retreating from society though, versus saying, again, like I talked about at the beginning, to where when you don't have power and and a church has become apostate, what do? You need to actually leave. You need to come out from among them. Right. Or if you have power, you need to excommunicate. But leaving society, no, that's not really the way to do it, because that's not how Christians are, commanded to go into the world and all that.
Right. And I just want to emphasize, there's the two, we always talk about the two ditches, right? And I think the Benedict option is like the ditch on the other side, where the Christian just leaves society and then it's like, we're going to regroup in 1,000 years and then come fight Gog and Magog. And it's like, no, that's clearly not what is taught in the first century, in New Testament first century Christians didn't do that at all. But then on the other side too, to our point of God retreated. And not only is it not cowardice, but this was actually to further salvation. Redeemed Zoomers is going to make the point that when the conservatives leave, the denomination goes more liberal and dies. Okay, so when God
maybe it
left,
should die. Maybe the PCS USA should.
Well, yeah, that's two questions. So when God leaves the temple, when His Shekinah glory leaves the temple, is it for Israel to die? Well, it's for some to die, but it's actually to save the others. There's actually a salvific purpose in it. So maybe God is saying it's time for me to give them over to their depraved. It's time for Romans 1 to do its course. And you have to leave, not only for them to be judged, but for your salvation to continue. For you to continue to work out so you're not influenced, or the judgment doesn't splash on you like it would have like you brought up a lot, April, like it would have splashed on Lot.
Well, and it's sort of along those lines, Christ does take away the lampstand of churches.
Well, yeah.
And so are you really going to be like, no, I'm going to get it back? And it's like, okay, well, maybe Christ will give it to you back if, but probably that happens through a lot of prayer and all of that. I highly doubt it. It comes from you giving more money to liberals as a part of their denomination and giving more clout and name to them and influence and whatnot.
Well, that's part of it. You're lending your support to groups that are teaching things that are either unethical or heretical, things that are destroying the body.
Well, and one thing that I really want to say is, look, I've been in, let me give you, here's some personal testimony. I've been in churches that were not heretical, and yet they were subpar in terms of their teaching. I'll just say Baptist churches, that frankly just didn't teach a whole lot of apostolic stuff other than just what was essential. And because I, through Bible college and seminary, am basically a titanium fortress, was really not affected that much by it. My children were. So I think it's great if he can go ahead and be in, although I think I heard someone say he joined a PCA church to get better counseling or something, to where he's he's going to one while he's a member of the PC USA. I'm not sure. But you may be so well fortified. I don't know if he is really in this young age, but you may be unaffected by it. Your children will not be. Is that faithful for you to stay in it? I don't think so. Your children are going to be told, and I don't care how much influence you think you have, when you're going to a church and you're communicating, I'm not breaking fellowship with this guy who is, and this larger church that largely believes that it's okay to ordain homosexuals, and and this lifestyle is actually okay with God and everything, that somehow your influence over your children is not going to harm you're going to protect your children that way. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Your children will be affected by it. Your wife may be affected by it because she's not where you're at. Like, this will not go without having really bad effects on your family. And so is it faithful to do this? I would say absolutely not. If you personally went in as a ministry, fine. But you having your family under this authority, absolutely not.
I mean, you may like intellectually not be affected.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but we've talked a lot about it recently with numbers about communal sin.
Yeah.
You are going to be affected by the communal sin.
Yes, absolutely.
Regardless of how much you know or how intellectual you are, how sound your doctrine is, you will be affected somehow.
Yeah, you're gonna have emotional crises of faith and all that sort of stuff.
Let us continue.
But there was a very clear distinction between the magisterial Reformation, which was institutional, and the Radical Reformation, which was anti-institutional. And the magisterial reformers, Luther and Calvin and Zwingli and Knox, they saw themselves as having much more unity with the Catholics than with the Radical Reformation.
Okay, this is absolutely not true. Okay, well, let me say this. It's partially true.
I would say it's true. They did not associate with the radicals.
So they didn't feel continuity with the Radical Reformation in terms of, because it was getting so anti-cultural, anti-society.
And that took time.
Yeah,
it wasn't immediate. Yeah,
right. And but Luther and Calvin saw them as a way to give credence to the Antichrist Church of Rome, because they looked at them as undermining their argument. So it's sort of like taking their words and distorting them the way that Rome was distorting them.
Yeah.
So, you're just saying that people can do anything. They just can have sex with anybody they want, and they can just, throw off all authority and everything. And these guys, the Anabaptists, a lot of them were communicating, that's what they're teaching. That's what Luther and Calvin are teaching. And so obviously they hated the Anabaptists and they wanted to show, no, we're not on their side. They're rebels against God, and they're from the devil, just like the Roman Catholic churches. And this is something I want to correct him in saying, and this is said a lot, and we may have not even been careful in saying this correctly before. Luther and Calvin do not believe the Roman church is the church. They don't believe it's a church. They believe there are churches, local churches, that are Christian within them, that are legitimate churches. They don't believe that the Roman church is church. So this is really important, because I think he thinks that Luther and Calvin believe that the Roman church was still church, that the institution was still valid. And they're like, no, if you read Calvin and the Institutes and you read Luther, they do not believe that the Roman church is true church. They think the Pope is the Antichrist, and anything under him is not a real church. But there are genuine Christians and genuine churches, local churches within it, that are truly saved people and truly churches, to be called churches.
Yeah, so they weren't going to undermine the authority that priests had locally, because they're under the umbrella of Rome. Right. But yeah, they for sure aren't going to say that the Rome and its doctrine, in saying that it's the church, it is the overseer of all churches globally, and all roads lead to the pontiff. Like, that's, they're going to say that is not church.
Yeah,
that is Antichrist, because Scripture has defined churches in a different way, drastically different way.
Well, and the magisterial Reformation is not. So he says, well, they're institutional. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? Because what denomination does Luther or Calvin belong to? you could say they start something. Even though I don't think Luther's trying to start a denomination or whatever.
Well, so like, well, the other thing, and maybe it's I've now granted I watched most of the video, and I doubt they bring this up, but the sacral society, the sacralism aspect of this whole like equation, right? I mean, there is Luther and Calvin did have the understanding like that Paul has when he's writing to Philemon, right? When he's writing to slaves, and he's like, look, if you can get your freedom, get it, but don't like rise up and rebel against these
Right.
wicked institutions that
Right.
are controlling society at large.
Yeah.
Christians aren't ones that go against even these wicked things. We wait for the Lord. That is what we do.
Yeah.
So like they do understand that they're not going to uproot everything that keeps everything together, wicked or not. They know that Satan still has a hold on this world. And what they are trying, and like, what would the end result have been if the magisterial reformation happened? It probably would have been a disillusion, or Rome would have released authority to these local churches, and they would have been able to rule as they saw fit under the same doctrine that the church has been handed down through the ages. But they aren't rebels, right? And this is like getting to the whole like peasants revolt. This is why I actually sympathize with Luther a little bit more. He's not as big of a monster as he's pointed out to be. He understands, like, no, this is anti-Christian. Like, I think God probably judged the peasant revolt and killing all those people because they became antichrist themselves. So, like, there's that understanding too that's not talked about so much, right? It's just it's an institution, and everybody just knows it. Like,
well,
no.
the great irony here too is that Samuel Rutherford is one of the forefathers of Presbyterian theology who wrote Lex Rex,
right?
Which is that it's actually a sin to submit to government that you think is tyrannical. You need to rebel, and I'm like, to me, that's an Anabaptist position. That's an anti-institutional position, and that's one of the forefathers. I think he even quotes Rutherford later on or something in this interview. And it's just like, again, I just think it's absurd to just lump everything into, oh, well, these guys were all for institutionalism and these guys were all against it and everything. And it's like, well, no, not really. Evangelicals are for institutions. They have lots of them. What you're really talking about is like how old your institution is and how long it's had that label on it. And then I just think the Roman Catholics have you at that point, because your institution, if it's not going to be rooted in apostolic teaching, then your institution is not going to be older than that of Roman Catholicism. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, and it's the moment you realize that the church is the only thing that's not in this world right now. It is the only thing that's not institutional because it's not of this world. Yeah. It is an eschatological thing. It is something that is actually going to. Now, this is the irony. Like, all this institutional talk is something that I agree with in the eschaton.
Right.
Like, I actually agree with then like our buildings will reflect God. It'll be all beautiful, and we all that's going to be true, and it's going to be run by these beautiful things. But that's then that's going to.
Well, I do wonder if he's post mill or not. I don't know if he is post mill, or maybe he's whatever, the positive Amil or something. But it does sound like an overrealized eschatology to some degree.
I think any overemphasis on beautification and like the overemphasis of communicating a future kingdom and a now institution is just overrealized. It's the danger. Everyone thinks what Paul says in 2 Thessalonians, where you have the ones that have said Christ has returned, thinks that it's just those saying, we're full preterists are the heretics. We can put our toes into that heresy and saying the kingdom is overrealized. Christ has returned more than he has, right? Or like the kingdom is here more than it is. Or it's you in your power to bring the kingdom more than it is, or whatever is towing that line.
Well, what's interesting is, so he'll do the it's Gnostic to the whole Gnostic line. And I just think it's funny because you quoted those guys. Those guys are largely probably Gnostic. in believing that, well, Christ has already come and it's a spiritual thing. And so since it's already come, we're already in the new age. And so now we need to beautify the world. And so I just think it's funny that overrealized eschatology is actually, even though in our day, people are like, oh, I'm anti-Gnostic, which is why I'm bringing in the beauty now and everything. But ironically, overrealized eschatology tends to be Gnostic, because it tends to spiritualize that the new heavens and new earth have already come, and therefore now we can go ahead and take over everything. Now we can go ahead and make everything pretty, and it's going to be fine, and we're going to largely have the victory in this world and whatnot. And so the great irony, I think, is in trying to be what I would say overreactionary toward the Gnostic inclination of things, people end up clinging to the beautiful things in the world, the rich things in the world. Look at the 19th century. That was the most Gnostic century I would think we ever had, I think, in America. Spiritism was just everywhere. Christianity was very Gnostic. All the cults were coming out of, Christian movements because of the Gnosticism and whatnot. And yet never was there a time that so many social projects to reform society, to beautify buildings, to make people more educated. Never was there more a time than that, because of the Gnosticism, not because they were anti-Gnostic.
Well, and maybe this is a conversation for a different time, because I don't want to go off track here, but I think part of this problem that we have is that we conflate beauty and aesthetics. So we think that those things are somehow the same, and they're not the same. You have all sorts of beautiful things that we have received from God, and that we exemplify beauty in our lives towards one another in displaying the character of God to one another. And those things are not necessarily aesthetic.
Well, yeah, we just talked about modesty, right? In terms of what is truly beautiful. Is it really, the braiding of the hair? And it's like, well, yeah, you can see everyone who is like, if you have no connection to God whatsoever and you live like a dog, can see a pretty woman and be like, oh, she's beautiful. But only those who actually are not living in the mud can look at a woman who just has really good character and say that's beautiful. And I think that's lost. That this is a fleshly understanding of what is beautiful. It's a fleshly understanding of what I think the institution of Christianity is. And that's why I think it just ends up coming down to a ridiculous argument of labels and buildings and stuff.
All right. Well, okay. So we're going to stop there. Just to recap what we've talked about, we've gone over basically definitions of institutionalism, why the church is not an institution, what it means for the church to continue down through the ages. We're really attacking the axiom here of both, I would say, of Redeemed Zoomer and Trent Horn, because they're both institutionalists. But we're saying that our little church in Las Vegas, Nevada, that's not part of a institution, quote unquote, or denomination even, is in the apostolic succession and is actually part of the small c Catholic Church universal, that whose head is Christ. So next time we talk, next time we look at this video, we'll go through some more arguments. But any last words you guys want to say?
Well, just to argue that, the Belgic Confession actually says that the head of the church is Christ, and that's where its authority is. And that actually, to me, is that means that we don't actually have this hierarchy and institution that's over the local church. Certainly the local church is an institution in a way. And I do think that sometimes he uses that term to talk about the local church, which is kind of confusing. But at the end of the day, it's through the truth that has been taught, that's been given to us in Scripture, which is why we can say we believe in sola scriptura, that gives us the authority of a local church, not a name, not being a part of some group that you can find in history that had the same name as you, but no longer believes what the apostles believe. To me, that's just a ridiculous notion.
We did talk about denominations being antichrist, so I will link that video below.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be helpful. All right. If you want to support us further, join our Patreon, subscribe, like, or dislike, whatever, just interact. And send this video out if you think it's helpful. Send it to Gavin. I would love, I just really like Gavin Ortland, and we're I don't know if he would ever take the time to listen to one of our videos. But if any of you viewers know,
He's probably too busy for us.
Yeah, it's probably
yeah, he
something.
probably is. But hey, maybe we'll leak through the cracks. So watch one and engage with us. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, share it with your friends, get it out, get the word out. Come out and hang out with us, talk theology, grow, and learn to be more like Christ together. Peace.
Bye.
By Morgan.
I am your only future.
But they don't like they're bred for war. So like Saruman like literally grows them in his
Who among
Under-
you dare say
In like his vat.
yeah in his
orc
vats,
vat.
right? And he like gives a sword to him and they go fight. That's like, and Uruk-hai are like better than the original orc or whatever because they can be in the daylight.
The reason why I like Moby Dick so much is, to me, there's a parallel with Genesis. So it's actually history. It's history that Melville he's interviewed. This actually occurred to a bunch of whalers.
Yeah.
And the survivors he interviewed.
Yeah.
And it became this book. But notice how he's writing this history. It's not, here's all the facts that happened. All right, the end. He's writing it because he wants to put meaning and a message to what has occurred.